stop everything right now because overnight, meteorologists just detected a critical shift in a developing storm system that's rewriting forecast maps across the entire eastern United States at 1:59 a.m. Eastern Time this morning. Saturday, January 11th, NOAA's Weather Prediction Center issued a statement that should concern every American from Boston to Miami. Some signal exists for a cyclone to develop near to well offshore the northeast coast in the Thursday-Friday time frame. Here's why that single sentence is causing emergency managers across 15 states to completely revise their preparation plans. At the 4-minute mark, I'll reveal exactly what changed in the last 24 hours that transformed this from an offshore system into a potential direct hit on 50 million Americans. By minute 8, you'll understand why the GFS and European models are now showing completely opposite storm tracks, creating dangerous forecast uncertainty. And at minute 12, I'll show you the 3 critical dates between now and January 24th when this atmospheric chaos peaks and which regions face the greatest threat during each window. Here's the number that should immediately grab your attention and explain why the word shift is being used in weather briefings across the Northeast Corridor. As of Friday evening, January 10th, the American GFS model was showing this coastal storm developing well offshore, minimal impact to land areas, a typical winter nor'easter that stays over open ocean. By Saturday morning, January 11th, less than 12 hours later, model guidance began diverging dramatically. While the GFS started showing a weakening trend, other forecast models maintained or even strengthened the system and critically shifted its track closer to the heavily populated coastline from New Jersey through Massachusetts. When you see phrases like, "It remains unclear how much of a weather hazard the system might become" in official NOAA discussions, that's meteorologist speak for we have a potentially major storm developing, but we don't know if it's going to hit you or miss you, and that uncertainty exists just 5 days before potential impact. Let me be absolutely clear about what makes this storm track shift genuinely dangerous and why millions of Americans need to pay attention right now, not Wednesday, not Thursday, but today. The difference between a storm that develops near to well offshore versus one that tracks along or just inland of the coast is the difference between minor coastal flooding and a full-scale blizzard that shuts down the entire northeast megalopolis. We're talking about the I-95 corridor that houses over 50 million people, includes 6 of America's largest metropolitan areas, and carries 40% of the nation's economic activity. Boston, New York City, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., and every city in between sits in this zone of maximum uncertainty. A 50-mile shift in storm track could mean the difference between rain and 18 inches of snow, between business as usual and complete transportation paralysis. Here's the timeline of transformation that demonstrates how rapidly atmospheric conditions can shift from predictable to chaotic when multiple weather systems interact in unexpected ways. Wednesday, January 8th. Meteorologists track 2 separate storm systems moving across the southern United States. Initial forecasts call for these systems to bring rain to the south, some snow to the Midwest, and generally move through without major coastal development. Standard midwinter weather pattern, nothing alarming. Thursday, January 9th. Computer models begin hinting that these 2 systems might interact as they move northeast, potentially creating a stronger combined storm system than either would produce independently. Forecast confidence remains moderate. Warnings are issued for the immediate impacts: rain and thunderstorms across the southeast, snow bands across the Great Lakes. Friday, January 10th morning, Fox Weather reports a critical development that changes everything. Quote, "Computer forecast models are in stronger agreement that 2 distinct areas of low pressure will move out of the southern Rockies, back-to-back, beginning Thursday, after forecasts earlier in the week called for just 1 cross-country storm. This isn't just a minor model adjustment. This represents a fundamental shift in the atmospheric setup. Instead of 1 manageable system, forecasters are now tracking 2 systems whose interaction could produce explosive coastal development." Friday, January 10th evening. The American GFS model begins showing the coastal storm developing Thursday into Friday, January 16th through 17th, but trending weaker with each successive model run. Simultaneously, European and Canadian models maintain or increase storm intensity and shift the track closer to shore. This model disagreement, occurring just 6 days before potential impact, creates the forecast nightmare scenario where emergency managers don't know whether to activate full disaster protocols or maintain routine operations. Saturday, January 11th, 1:59 a.m. Eastern Time. NOAA's weather. Prediction Center issues their extended forecast discussion with the statement about the cyclone developing near to well offshore the northeast coast. The critical phrase, "It remains unclear how much of a weather hazard the system might become," appears in official government forecast guidance. By Saturday mid-morning, the forecast has evolved from routine coastal storm to potential major winter event with massive uncertainty about track, intensity, and impacts. This transformation happened in less than 72 hours, demonstrating how quickly atmospheric chaos can develop in January when multiple storm systems, Arctic air masses, and coastal dynamics all converge simultaneously. Now let me explain the atmospheric mechanics that allow a storm to change direction and intensity so dramatically in such a short time window, because understanding the physics helps you recognize when forecasts are likely to shift versus when they're relatively stable. Coastal storms along the eastern seaboard develop through a process called cyclogenesis, where low-pressure systems strengthen by tapping into the temperature contrast between cold continental air and warm Gulf stream waters just offshore. The intensity of these storms depends critically on several factors: the amount of cold air available, the position of the jet stream, the ocean water temperatures, and the phasing of upper-level energy with surface features. When all these factors align perfectly, you get explosive development that can produce historic blizzards. When they're slightly misaligned, you get modest coastal storms that stay offshore and cause minimal impact. The challenge forecasters face right now is that all these factors are in flux simultaneously. The polar vortex, that massive circulation of cold air normally locked over the Arctic, has been displaced southward through a stratospheric warming event that experts are calling nearly unprecedented for January. Published just yesterday, analysis from atmospheric scientists reveals, quote, "We are seeing metrics that we normally associate with late February occurring in early January. That shifts the odds for atypical cold outbreaks and persistent blocking patterns across the mid-latitudes. This displaced polar vortex creates two critical effects that directly impact coastal storm development. First, it makes Arctic air masses more readily available to fuel coastal systems with the cold air they need for heavy snow rather than rain. Second, it creates blocking patterns that can steer storms on unusual tracks, forcing them to take paths that historical data and computer models struggle to predict accurately. Simultaneously, the Eastern Pacific Oscillation, a climate pattern that controls whether mild Pacific air flows into North America or gets blocked, is transitioning from its positive to its negative phase right now, this weekend, January 11th through 12th. According to DTN forecasting analysis published 3 days ago, this transition doesn't produce instant cooling, but by January 17th through 18th, conditions will trend significantly colder across the central and eastern United States. This is the exact time window when the coastal storm is forecast to develop. The timing couldn't be worse from a forecast uncertainty perspective because the atmospheric pattern is actively reorganizing itself at the same moment a potentially major storm system approaches the most populated corridor in America. For those of you over 30 who remember when 7-day forecasts were reasonably reliable and major storms didn't materialize out of nowhere with 48 hours notice, this represents the new reality of winter weather forecasting. The climate baseline has shifted in ways that make historical analog forecasting less effective. The atmospheric patterns your experience tells you to expect no longer occur with the same frequency or in the same configurations. Arctic air that used to stay locked over Canada for weeks now surges south in pulses separated by just days. Ocean temperatures along the East Coast run warmer than historical norms, providing more energy for storm intensification. The jet stream develops larger amplitude waves that create blocking patterns and unusual storm tracks. All these changes compound to create situations where forecast models that usually agree within reasonable margins suddenly diverge dramatically, leaving forecasters and emergency managers facing critical decisions with inadequate information. Here are the three critical dates between now and January 24th when this atmospheric chaos peaks, and the specific threats each window presents to different regions of the country. Critical Date 1, Sunday, January 12th through Monday, January 13th. This is the last window before the Arctic air begins its southward plunge and before the coastal storm threat materializes. 8 states are currently under winter storm warnings for 4 to 7 inches of snow through Sunday morning across portions of the Great Lakes region. Michigan's Upper Peninsula could see 4 to 8 inches from the Porcupine Mountains to the Hurons as an upper-level low projects heavy snow bands across northern Michigan. If you live in Wisconsin, northern Michigan, northern Minnesota, or the western Great Lakes region, this is your preparation window. Stock emergency supplies today, Sunday at the latest, because by Monday the pattern begins shifting and your next opportunity to prepare safely may not come for days. Critical Date 2, Thursday, January 16th through Friday, January 17th. This is when the coastal cyclone is forecast to develop near to well offshore the northeast coast, and this is the window of maximum danger and maximum uncertainty for 50 million Americans in the I-95 corridor. As of this morning, we do not know with confidence whether this system will track far enough offshore to spare coastal cities, track close enough to produce moderate impacts, or track directly over the coast, producing catastrophic blizzard conditions. The spread in forecast models is simply too large. The GFS weakening trend suggests a less threatening scenario, but European model guidance maintains a stronger, more impactful storm. History teaches us that when models disagree this dramatically, this close to an event, the actual outcome often falls somewhere between the extremes, but occasionally verifies closer to one model's solution, vindicating that guidance while leaving the other model's forecast completely wrong. For residents of Boston, Providence, Hartford, New York City, Newark, Philadelphia, Wilmington, Baltimore, and Washington, D.C., here's what you need to understand about this uncertainty. By Tuesday evening, January 14th, forecast confidence will increase substantially as we move inside the 48-hour window where models typically converge on a solution. That Tuesday evening forecast will be your best guide for finalizing preparation decisions. If forecasts at that point show the storm tracking close to or over your area, complete all emergency preparations Tuesday night and Wednesday morning. Do not wait for Thursday when conditions may already be deteriorating. This means stocking food, water, medications, heating fuel, and emergency supplies. This means canceling Thursday and Friday travel plans if forecasts show significant impact potential. This means charging electronic devices, filling vehicles with gas, and preparing your home for potential power outages lasting days, not hours, in January cold. Critical Date 3, January 17th through January 24th. This is when the pattern change driven by the negative Eastern Pacific Oscillation and displaced polar vortex reaches its peak intensity across the central and eastern United States. According to the latest extended forecasts, sub-zero temperatures are expected across the Dakotas, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, with low temperatures consistently approaching the 20s and 30s Fahrenheit across Kansas and Oklahoma. This represents a dramatic shift from the record warmth much of the country experienced through early January. The Arctic air will be reinforced by clipper systems, fast-moving low-pressure areas that drop out of Canada and track across the Great Lakes, bringing frequent snow and maintaining cold conditions for extended periods. This third window matters because it creates the background conditions that make coastal storm impacts more severe and recovery more difficult. If the Thursday-Friday coastal storm produces significant snowfall and knocks out power across portions of the Northeast, that power restoration occurs in the teeth of the Arctic outbreak, making outages more dangerous and repairs more difficult. Road conditions that might improve quickly during mild weather become locked in as packed snow and ice that persists for weeks when temperatures stay below freezing continuously. The cascading impacts multiply when extreme cold follows major storm events, creating compound disasters that strain emergency response capabilities beyond their design limits. Now let me reveal what changed in the last 24 hours that's causing the storm track uncertainty and why this pattern has such high bust potential in both directions. The interaction between the two back-to-back storm systems moving across the country is creating what meteorologists call phasing uncertainty. When two separate areas of low pressure approach each other, they can either merge into one larger system, pass by each other independently, or interact in ways that strengthen or weaken one or both systems. The exact outcome depends on the timing of their arrival, the strength of each system, and the configuration of the jet stream when they come together. Forecast models handle this phasing process differently based on their underlying physics and resolution. The American GFS model uses one set of equations and assumptions about how atmospheric energy transfers during these interactions. The European model uses different, higher resolution approaches. When both models show the same solution, confidence is high that they've captured the essential physics correctly. When they diverge, as they are now, it means the atmospheric setup contains subtle features that significantly impact the outcome, but those features are below the threshold that current models can resolve with confidence. Small errors in the initial conditions, things like temperature at a specific altitude over the Atlantic Ocean, can cascade through the forecast and produce dramatically different storm tracks 5 days later. This is why the phrase, "small changes to the track and temperature could cause shifts to these effects," appears in multiple official forecast discussions this week. Meteorologists aren't hedging or being vague. They're communicating the physical reality that this particular atmospheric setup sits near a tipping point where minor variations produce major outcome differences. From a preparation standpoint, this type of forecast uncertainty demands a specific response strategy. You cannot wait for certainty because certainty won't arrive until 24 to 48 hours before impact, and by then your preparation window may have closed if conditions have already deteriorated. The economic implications of this storm track uncertainty extend far beyond the immediate weather impacts. Airlines operating hub airports in Newark, Philadelphia, and Washington Dulles are making crew, scheduling, and aircraft positioning decisions right now based on forecasts that could change dramatically over the next 3 days. If they position aircraft away from the Northeast, anticipating a major storm that doesn't materialize, they face operational inefficiencies and lost revenue. If they maintain normal operations and a major storm develops, they face canceled flights, stranded passengers, and aircraft stuck in the wrong locations for days. Either way, somebody loses money, and that cost gets passed to consumers through higher fares and reduced service reliability. Retailers, particularly grocery stores and home improvement chains, face similar challenges. Stock up too much on snow shovels, ice melt, and emergency supplies before a storm that fizzles. And you've tied up capital and inventory that won't move for weeks. Stock too little and a major storm hits, and you lose sales to competitors while facing angry customers who couldn't get needed supplies. Energy markets experience volatility as natural gas and heating oil traders try to anticipate demand spikes that occur when Arctic air combines with major storms. School districts make decisions about closing or staying open based on forecasts that might change, facing criticism either way when the actual outcome differs from predictions. This is the hidden cost of forecast uncertainty that most people never consider. Every business, government agency, and institution that depends on accurate weather forecasting to make efficient resource allocation decisions faces degraded performance when atmospheric chaos creates high uncertainty situations. The aggregate economic impact of these inefficiencies runs into billions of dollars annually, and that cost increases as climate change makes extreme weather more frequent and atmospheric patterns more chaotic. Now let me address the question that's probably forming in your mind. If forecast uncertainty is this high and models disagree this dramatically, how should you make decisions about your family's safety and your business operations over the next week? The answer comes down to risk assessment and asymmetric consequences. Preparing for a major storm that doesn't happen costs you time and money, but those costs are relatively modest and temporary. Failing to prepare for a major storm that does happen could cost you your safety, your property, or even your life, and those consequences are irreversible. Professional emergency managers use a framework called the precautionary principle when facing high uncertainty, high consequence situations. It states that when an activity or situation raises threats of harm to human health or the environment, precautionary measures should be taken even if some cause and effect relationships are not fully established scientifically. Applied to the storm situation, the precautionary principle suggests you should prepare now for the possibility of a major coastal storm Thursday, Friday, even though current forecast confidence is low because the potential consequences of being unprepared are severe. This doesn't mean panic or overreaction. It means taking measured steps that increase your resilience regardless of which forecast scenario verifies. Stock emergency food and water that you'll eventually use anyway. Fill prescriptions early so you're not scrambling during a crisis. Charge electronic devices and fill vehicle gas tanks. Basic preparedness that costs almost nothing but provides substantial benefit if conditions deteriorate. Adjust travel plans to build in flexibility so you're not committed to being in transit during the highest risk window. These steps protect you if the worst-case forecast verifies while costing you almost nothing if the mild scenario plays out. For businesses and institutions, the same logic applies but with more complex trade-offs. Airlines can't simply cancel all Thursday, Friday flights based on a low-confidence forecast, but they can position extra crews and aircraft in locations that allow rapid recovery once the actual storm track becomes clear. School districts can't close preemptively 5 days before a potential storm, but they can pre-stage decision points where they commit to closing or staying open based on updated forecasts. Retailers can increase emergency supply inventory modestly without making large financial bets on any single outcome. The broader pattern we're witnessing extends beyond this particular storm and these particular dates. The displaced polar vortex that's creating this week's chaos is forecast to influence weather patterns through late January and potentially into February. Analysis published just yesterday warns that this early season displacement sure creates stuck patterns. Whether it's cold, storms, or weird warmth, the pattern tends to persist longer than usual because the blocking patterns associated with vortex disruption can last for weeks. This means January 2026 is likely to feature more forecast uncertainty, more extreme swings between warmth and cold, and more situations where Americans face difficult planning decisions with incomplete information. Climate scientists have been warning for years that Arctic amplification, the faster warming of polar regions compared to mid-latitudes, would destabilize weather patterns and make forecasting more difficult. We're now living through that prediction becoming reality. The atmospheric baseline our grandparents knew, where winter meant consistently cold, where spring meant predictably warming, where seasons transitioned gradually over weeks, that baseline no longer exists. We've entered a regime where rapid transitions occur over days, where temperature swings of 40 to 50 degrees happen in 24 hours, where forecast models trained on historical data struggle to predict patterns that have no clear historical analog. This creates profound challenges for every system we've built, assuming climate stability. Infrastructure designed for 100-year flood events now faces 100-year floods every 10 years. Building codes based on historical snow loads become inadequate when storms produce snow accumulations that exceed those historical precedents. Agricultural planting schedules optimize for predictable spring, warming encounter, chaotic freeze-thaw cycles that destroy crops. Power grids engineered for gradual seasonal demand, changes experience demand spikes that overload capacity. Transportation networks optimize for historical weather, patterns face disruptions that cascade into system-wide failures. The storm track uncertainty we're experiencing this week represents a microcosm of this larger adaptation challenge. How do we make good decisions when the information available is incomplete and the consequences of wrong decisions are severe? How do we build resilient systems when we can't predict with confidence what stresses those systems will face? How do we maintain economic efficiency when forecast uncertainty forces conservative, inefficient resource positioning? These aren't just weather questions. These are fundamental challenges to how we organize modern society. And the answers will determine which communities and which nations successfully navigate the climate disruption that's already underway and accelerating. Let me close with specific, actionable guidance for the next 2 weeks, because abstract discussion of climate change doesn't help you protect your family or manage your business. Through this particular episode of Atmospheric Chaos, today, Sunday, January 12th, complete emergency preparation for potential week-long isolation during extreme cold. This means 2 weeks of non-perishable food, 1 gallon of water per person per day, full prescriptions for all medications, alternative heating that doesn't depend on electricity, flashlights, batteries, hand crank or battery-powered radio, and first aid supplies. If you're in the Northeast or Mid-Atlantic, this preparation is mandatory regardless of what the Thursday-Friday coastal storm does, because the Arctic outbreak, January 17th through 24th, is highly confident and will create dangerous conditions even without a major storm. Monday, January 13th through Tuesday, January 14th. Monitor forecast updates obsessively. Check NOAA's Weather Prediction Center discussions at least twice daily. Watch for trend changes in model guidance. By Tuesday evening, forecast confidence for the Thursday-Friday coastal storm will increase substantially. Use that Tuesday evening forecast as your final decision point for travel plans, business operations, and emergency positioning. If forecasts at the time show significant storm potential for your area, cancel Thursday and Friday commitments. The inconvenience of canceling plans that you might not have needed to cancel is trivial compared to the danger of being caught traveling when a major storm develops. Wednesday, January 15th, final preparation day if forecasts confirm significant storm threat. Top off vehicle gas tanks. Charge all electronic devices. Bring in outdoor decorations or equipment that could become projectiles in high winds. Stock up on any last-minute items you didn't get over the weekend. Communicate with family members about plans. If you lose power, where will you go? If you need to evacuate, what's your route? These conversations need to happen before crisis, not during. Thursday, January 16th through Friday, January 17th. Stay home if significant storm impacts are forecast for your area. No work meeting, no shopping trip. No social obligation is worth risking your safety during a potential blizzard. Monitor conditions. If you lose power, know when to stay home versus when to seek shelter with family, friends, or emergency warming centers. Cold weather kills primarily through hypothermia when people try to wait out extended power outages in homes that lose heat. Don't be a statistic because you didn't want to impose on others. Saturday, January 18th through Friday, January 24th. Hunker down for the Arctic outbreak. Even if the coastal storm misses or underperforms, the extreme cold is highly confident. Protect pipes, minimize outdoor exposure, check on elderly neighbors, and respect the power of sub-zero cold combined with wind. This is the type of cold that kills in minutes, not hours, if you're caught outside unprepared. This is the type of cold that overwhelms heating systems and creates emergency situations, even in well-prepared homes. The storm just changed direction. Millions are now potentially in direct path. Forecast uncertainty is high. The consequences of being wrong are severe. You now have the information you need to make intelligent preparation decisions, even when forecasts can't give you certainty. The question that will determine your family's safety and your ability to navigate this atmospheric chaos is simple. Will you prepare now while you still have time, or will you wait for certainty that may arrive too late to act? Positivo source